Good evening, everybody. Brian Neubert here from goldenblack.com, live in Mackey Arena. Taking a deep breath, settle down from the evening of battling Wi-Fi issues during this Purdue-Indiana game. Indiana, when they play here, they bring lots of media people. Some of my dearest friends in the world, I love every one of them, but they come here, they eat all the media room cookies, they slow down the Wi-Fi, and life changes considerably for all of us, and for those of us who are creatures of habit, who don't deal with change very well, who don't deal with adversity terribly well, like myself, it is a bit harrowing. And it was, in fact, that tonight, battling Wi-Fi all evening to make sure that you get your Twitter straight into your veins. We're through it. I've taken a deep breath. I've calmed down. We're ready to crank out the best rap video you've seen tonight. Purdue wins 57-49 over Indiana. It's 7th straight win over IU. It's a win that completes a 2-game regular season sweep over the Hoosiers for Purdue. In the bigger picture, obviously, it was a pulse, a sign of life from a Purdue team that had really kind of gone sideways here the last couple of games, losing 4 straight, obviously likely playing themselves out of the NCAA tournament. You know, there's still some things that can be done to maybe get them back in that conversation here. It's an uphill climb for certain, but this was at least a sign of life. Now, make no mistake here. Purdue was far from awesome in this game. Indiana was as far from awesome as one can possibly get. This was another Purdue-Indiana rock fight. I don't know really. I get paid to come up with like analogies, metaphors, if you will, similes, whatever the difference between all those things are. These teams have played a couple of games here the last 2 years that, if you ask me what I would compare it to, having to watch it, I would probably say something along the lines of, you know, the little pictures on the side of Poison where it's like the tongue sticking out. I think that's kind of the reaction from a lot of people watching. What also comes to mind is lobsters starting a family, shall we say. Just ugly, just something you don't want to watch. That was disgusting. I understand that was disgusting. I shouldn't have said that. But I start this thing and I just talk. So I shouldn't have said that. Again, Purdue wins 57-49 over Indiana. As you're well aware, I'm just hitting the reset button on this whole stupid video. Purdue was really good defensively. I can say a lot of the same things I said after Purdue won in Bloomington a couple weeks ago. Those being, I don't think Indiana, at this stage of its program with the personnel it has right now, I don't know how tricky a cover they are. I don't know how hard to guard they are necessarily. I'm not saying they don't have good players. They obviously have good players, but if you can take away Jackson Davis, if you can take away their front line on the offensive glass, and Devontae Green, as I wrote before the game, didn't eat his spinach that morning, these guys can be stopped. I think Purdue matches up fairly well with them from a defensive perspective. I think, Purdue doubles the post against everyone it plays, so Indiana should have been obviously prepared for that. The reality of it is, though, you're doing it to a freshman playing on the road in the Big Ten, and double teams can be beaten. When you make the right decision, when you make the right pass, double teams can be beaten. The problem for Indiana tonight was, A, Purdue did a really good job doing it. They were really good in what they were doing defensively. It seemed live. That's not to say they were flawless, but I thought they were really good in what they were doing live. The second part of that is Trace Jackson Davis is a freshman. You're asking him to make those decisions, make those plays in a really difficult environment. His body of work this season on the road away from Assembly Hall has been a mixed bag. Obviously, he dominated at Minnesota, but before that, he had done very little in games like this. But also, their supporting cast just doesn't have that guy when Devontae Green's not making shots, and he was only 3 of 14 tonight. They don't have that second guy you really, really worry about. There's guys on the floor most of the time you really don't have to worry a whole lot about. I mean, you can win with guys like that, but Indiana has a few of them. They just don't have a lot of real weapons outside of Jackson Davis. Purdue did a fantastic job making things really difficult on Jackson Davis, and once they cleaned up the defensive glass in the first half, when Indiana couldn't make a shot to save its life anyway, I thought that Purdue really asserted itself as the better team. I think Purdue in general is the better team. I think the results of the two games have showed up. Purdue is a better basketball team than Indiana. I think that we can say that with relative certainty. The difference is Indiana is probably going to the NCAA tournament. Purdue most likely is going to the NIT or wherever else they should wind up, because Indiana won at Nebraska, Purdue lost at Nebraska. Indiana beat Florida State at home. Purdue had Florida State on the ropes, let it get away at the end. When Indiana needed to win home games late in the season, Indiana won those home games late in the season. When Purdue had to win home games late in the season, it lost two of them in relatively one-sided fashion, no less. Just two teams that were going in different directions, but one is better than the other. And I think, again, the results of these two games between these two teams kind of bear that out, because Purdue won both of these games relatively comfortably. I know there were some anxious moments in the final few minutes after a 5-point possession because of a flagrant foul, but really I don't think anybody was really thinking that Purdue was melting down and Indiana was going to steal this at the end. Part of the reason that Indiana never got in that position was obviously they couldn't score. That scoring typically in basketball is helpful. But I think that a bunch of Purdue guys did a lot of really important things, and I think the guy who really bears mentioning first and foremost is Travion Williams. I think this is the guy on this team, this very limited offensive team that Purdue has this year. I think he is the guy that gives them the best chance. Playing through him whenever you can, I think really gives Purdue the best chance, because he's a really good one-on-one scorer. He's a really good passer. I know he's a guy they've thrust into that role quite a bit. You would obviously prefer he'd be a little bit of a better foul shooter. His value is amplified when Purdue's making shots around him. That's been kind of a hit-or-miss deal. But he's the guy Purdue's going to in situations where they need a bucket. And there was no bigger basket made in this game, arguably, than the last field goal. I think the last field goal Travion Williams made, where Purdue had been scoreless for 3+ minutes. Indiana had it down to 6. Indiana hedges the ball screen, which you shouldn't do that against Purdue. You have this offense that really struggles to generate space for itself man-to-man, and you basically hand over freedom of movement to them by hedging that ball screen, allowing the big men to get into the lane, allowing them to get your defense moving. It's not the way to guard Purdue. I know it's what they do, but it's a big advantage for Purdue. It's the reason Matt Harms was productive in the first half. It was a big part of the reason Travion Williams was productive throughout the game. But be that as it may, on this really big basket by Travion Williams, Indiana, if I recall correctly, hedges the ball screen, allows Travion Williams to roll into a post-up, ball gets reversed, I think to Sasha Stefanovic. This is my Matt Painter memory, my immediate recall of how these plays unfolded. Reverse it to Sasha Stefanovic, he feeds the post one-on-one with Deron Davis, I believe. And Travion Williams hits a little 6-foot right-handed hook. Huge basket. Purdue was really struggling to score. This place was starting to quiver a little bit. Huge basket. That is what you do when you have a go-to guy. You get him the ball, you get out of the way, and you let him go to work. And that's exactly what Purdue did there. Travion Williams, Purdue's go-to guy. On a team that really doesn't have maybe necessarily that sure thing sort of guy, but I think Travion Williams, the best way to put it is he's their best chance, and he was their best chance tonight. He was really productive. He was really good. Eric Hunter was really, really good after he'd really struggled during the 4-game losing streak. Again, this was his best game since Purdue last played Indiana. So somebody's bringing their best against the Hoosiers, and his name is Eric Hunter. Beyond that, I think that Jahad Proctor had a bad first half. I thought he had a really good second half, made some really important plays, had a couple of really important buckets, made a really nice pass to Eric Hunter on a back cut. That was a stretch of the game where Purdue wasn't exactly lighting the world on fire offensively. For them to get a little bit of offense from Jahad Proctor there, I thought was really big. Evan Boudreau got them off to a great start to the second half with his little 5-0 run to start the half. I thought Matt Harms did some really, really good things in the first half. Again, hedging the ball screen. That is why he was so productive last season. That's his comfort zone. You play to Purdue's strengths when you do that. And those are Matt Harms' strengths. When Purdue needed to close that game out in Bloomington, what'd they do? Indiana hedges the ball screen twice. Purdue hits Matt Harms on the roll twice for 2 buckets. Game over. Anyway, a lot of Purdue guys played well here tonight. This was a good game for a number of individuals. Collectively, this is sort of that a win is a win is a win sort of game. You win this game really ugly. You win it with defense largely. You can look at it like, was Indiana just that bad offensively? Look at their shots in the first half. I mean, part of Indiana's offensive rebounding surge to start this game, I think, was the fact they were missing their shots so badly that unconventional rebounds were getting into the open floor a little bit better, and they just happened to be there a few times. But I think I put on Twitter, they weren't just missing the bottom of the net with their jumpers. They were missing the rim. There was at least one 30-second shot clock violation off a series where they got a respectable look, and they just missed it so bad it didn't hit the rim. Their jumpers were just all over the place. They're not the most skilled shooting team. Again, they're not the most skilled offensive team in college basketball. Their guards are very limited, much to a certain extent like Purdue's. Just don't have a lot of weapons around Jackson Davis. You take Jackson Davis away, the whole infrastructure around him can crumble. When Devontae Green isn't the best version of himself, which, he's obviously a very inconsistent player. When he's good, he's real good, and Indiana's real good. When he's not so good, he's 3 of 14 like he was tonight. You do have to give Purdue a lot of credit defensively. You have to give Purdue a lot of credit for upping its effort, for upping its presence on the boards. Closing off the offensive glass was the singular, I think, turning point in this game, because that's where Purdue really kind of seized control. That said, Purdue could have blown this game up in the second half. When they were up by 16, they missed like 4 threes that would have, Purdue might have won this game by 20, 21, 22, 25 points, whatever it may be, had they made a couple of those shots. In Bloomington, every time Purdue needed a shot for whatever reason, whether it was to head off an Indiana run, whether it was to start a run of its own, whatever it might have been, Purdue made that jumper in Bloomington. Today, I mean, obviously they did everything they needed to do offensively to win this game relatively comfortably, but they had a couple jumpers there where if they go, this place goes berserk. Indiana perhaps starts to move even faster, makes more mistakes. This is a game you won by 8, that had you made a couple of those threes, this could have been a game you won by 24 points, for all we know. But I don't think anybody's complaining about an 8-point win over Indiana. As I said before, I think Purdue's the better team. There's just a little bit of a divergence between the two, because outside of what they've done against each other, Indiana's done a lot more to help itself get to the NCAA tournament than Purdue's been able to do. But, even if Purdue doesn't go to the NCAA tournament this year, as I've said, 2 wins over Indiana, a 7-game winning streak over Indiana, a hell of a lot of memorable wins in this building this year. That's a pretty nice consolation prize. I know everybody wants to go to the NCAA tournament. We will see if that's in the cards for Purdue or not. But at the very least, Purdue can take some solace in the fact they've continued their domination over their hated, bitter rival. And I'm not talking about Iowa in football, obviously Indiana. So that's what I got. Our long, rambling, barely coherent diatribe following Purdue's 57-49 win over Indiana is now complete. Thank you for watching. Thank you for reading. Thank you for listening. Thank you for processing our materials. However it is you process our materials. We will talk to you again Tuesday night from the notoriously sketchy Wi-Fi'd Carver Hawkeye Arena in Iowa City. Big game for Purdue. An opportunity to make one up, to maybe get back in that NCAA tournament conversation if they can get that one, and then beat what should be a desperate Rutgers team. As I've always said, Rutgers is at its best when its back is to the wall, and it will be here next week in Mackey Arena. So, have a good night, everybody.